Hey everyone, Casey Scanlon here, bringing you another Lake of the Ozarks Fishing Report. It's been a really busy summer for me, so we haven't done a report in quite a while, been a few months. And fishing's been good all summer, been guiding 3 or 4 days a week, and been at home most of the time. We've had a little break from our Bassmaster tournament season, so doing a lot of guide trips, staying busy working, and the fish have been biting. So a lot of these fish have been, offshore when we had some current. Slacked off the current. A lot of them started relating to some boat docks, and now we're getting into kind of the fall time period. As you can see, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. It's been a super hot, warm summer, and now we're getting some cooler mornings, and it's finally sweatshirt weather. So I don't know if that's going to keep up or not. I'm sure we still got a lot of warm days in our future, but the fish are moving, the shad are moving, and I'm getting my nitro ready for the Bassmaster postseason. Next tournament's at Lake Champlain, and we just wrapped up a tournament in Minnesota. Was able to get a check and qualify for the EQs is what they're calling them. So got a few more tournaments this fall. Got a bunch of tournaments coming up here at Lake of the Ozarks, including a Toyota series. So a lot of fishing to do, and the fishing's going to get really good. So I know we've got a BFL and all the clubs and Big Bass Bash and things like that start coming to the lake. Lots of tournaments this fall. And fishing should be really good. So last week or so, last couple weeks, noticed a little bit of change. The fish are just kind of moving. Shad are moving. I'm starting to see a lot of white bass surfacing. So, the fish are definitely changing. The white bass have been crazy fun. There's been days where we've sat there and caught them for 3 or 4 hours, and they've came up surfacing the entire time, all the way across the cove, all the way across the lake in some instances. So big schools of white bass out there. Some of them are small, some of them are really big, so it just kind of depends, but just got to keep an eye out, look for some of those surfacing fish, maybe some bird activity, but a lot of times it's just about keeping a good eye out and staying on the look, and you'll see some fish surfacing here and there. And then if you just slow down and kind of keep your eyes peeled, you'll see the big group. Usually if you see a few coming up feeding on shad on the surface, then you can find a lot more underneath them, and using your live scope to kind of stay on those fish can be really beneficial too. I got the Garmin live scope, and it's been phenomenal. So let's talk fishing. I've been in this nitro all morning, just kind of going through some new tackle from Bass Pro, trying to get organized for some of my next tournaments. I'm going to have 4 or 5 in a row here, including a big championship at Lake Guntersville. So going to stay busy, so I got to stay organized, getting all my stuff together. And one of those tournaments is going to be Toyota Series here at Lake of the Ozarks at the end of the month. So really looking forward to that one, and the fishing should be good. So right now, water temps are still low 80s. They're probably, with these cool nights, they're going to dip into the upper 70s here and into the 70s really soon. So primarily, let's just say the fish are just spread out. We've got some fish suspended on boat docks still, and those fish are good. Usually quality is not quite there. You can catch a lot of keepers, a lot of numbers, but there's some fish relating to some of those deeper boat docks. There's a lot of fish still hanging around points. A lot of those fish are kind of up off the bottom, chasing shad around, schooling. We don't have a lot of current in the lake. They have been pulling a little bit in the evenings, I've noticed. So you got to pull up the generation schedule. If they are pulling water, you got to get on some of those current breaks, points. It varies. Sometimes it just puts them closer to the cover, whether it's a brush pile, a cable, or whatever it is. It just kind of makes them hold tighter and makes them feed better. So they kind of makes them just a little bit more predictable. So keep an eye out for the current. Still your main lake, your secondary points. Secondary points are always good when you have a transition period like this. Fish are moving from shallow to deep, and vice versa. They're constantly moving with the weather, with the shad, and these secondary points and channel banks that are kind of halfway back in creeks and stuff can be really good transition spots where these fish kind of stop or congregate as they're going back and forth in their movement, following shad or following their seasonal transitions from shallow to deep. So that can be really important. It's a good way to kind of put yourself around some fish. But check out the points. Brush piles, those are always good in the fall. You know, brush pile can be in 30, 35 foot of water. It can be in 2 or 3 foot of water. So it's kind of the name of the game in the fall. The fishing is really spread out. The fish are feeding. They're really chasing shad heavy, and they're really searching out those feeding opportunities. But the fish are on the move, so staying on a productive pattern for days on end can be difficult. So a lot of times you got to go out there with an open mind and kind of pattern the fish for the day. You know, throw a few different lures. If you're not getting bites, you know, change things up. So a lot of fish are starting that transition from summertime kind of to that fall transition. They're getting back into some of these creeks and coves. They're chasing shad. I'm seeing a lot of shad on the surface, you know, which is kind of what we see a lot in the fall. You'll see a lot of fish chasing on the surface, and it kind of gives you away to their location. But a lot of fish on the main lake surfacing, bass, white bass, they're all kind of grouped together. So keep an eye out for that. And I'm starting to see some of these pods of shad show up in the backs of the creeks. So that kind of puts fish on any kind of visible cover back there, whether it be a boat dock, a lay down, you know, underwater brush pile, anything that's going to hold a bass back there in that super shallow water. I'd say 6 foot and less is really key. Even on the boat docks, you know, some of those shallow docks can be really good. But, you know, those shallow fish are going to be back on the flats, whether it's a main lake flat or in the back of the creek. They're going to be on the flats. They're going to be chasing shad, and they're going to be using that cover that's on that flat to kind of, you know, hide and ambush the bait that comes by them. So those little pieces of cover can be very important. And, you know, the lures that we're throwing right now run the gamut. You know, we're throwing a lot of top waters. I've got a lot of baits like a popper. This is actually a chug bug. You know, that really works well, both on the bank and in open water. You know, I'm throwing, I've got a little spook right here. And again, great open water bait, great around boat docks. I'm reaching for straws here because I've got all my tackle kind of spread out, but buzz baits, whopper ploppers, you know, little tiny pop-ars, you know, anything on the surface can get a bite this time of year. It's one of my favorite ways to catch them. So for covering water, buzz baits, ploppers, you know, get on the bank, move fast, cover a lot of water. You know, for open water situations, fish schooling, you know, I kind of like more of a spook or pop-ar style bait. And I've noticed that a lot of these fish right now are feeding really heavy on small shad, especially the white bass. A lot of the fish kind of on docks on the main lake, very small shad fry. I mean, I'm talking, you know, minuscule. And when you catch one of these fish, they'll spit up 5 to 10 of them. So they're feeding really heavy on those small shad. They're just an easy meal for them. And there's a lot of them out there in that open water. So, you know, a lot of times matching that bait can be really key, especially for white bass. You know, they're great feeders, and they're used to feeding on live bait. So you want to kind of get something that's going to replicate what they're feeding on. So small little hair jig, inline spinners, road runner, you know, anything small that's going to mimic a crappie jig even, you know, anything small, flashy, that's going to get their attention. We'll catch those fish. We've been catching a lot of them on the Bass Pro Shops XPS popper. It's a great bait, by the way, and they've got a really small version of it. And yeah, it's been a great way to catch white bass and some of the largemouth and spots that are mixed in with them. So always fun watching them eat on top, and they've been more than willing to do that lately. So I haven't got out there and tried some of the bigger baits, but a lot of walking baits, and you know, that little pop-bar has been really deadly on some of those open water fish. Jig, it's my #1 bait all the time, no matter what lake, but I've got one here with the paint worn slick off of it, and you know, just throwing that with a variety of trailers: green pumpkin, brown, black, and blue. Pretty much the 3 colors that I throw here. You can vary, you know, kind of the accent colors, I guess you would say, on those skirts. You know, you can throw green pumpkin and orange, green pumpkin and chartreuse, you know, any kind of color combination, doesn't really matter. But those primary colors, like on your jig skirt, that base color, green pumpkin in the clear water or brown in that clear water, and then you get a little bit of stain, low light conditions, I like a black and blue jig. So don't get real complicated there. Your Texas rigs work super good right now, whether you're pitching to the boat docks or you're dropping that in a brush pile. Texas rig will work extremely well. And I want to show you guys kind of the rod and reel I've been using. I've fallen in love with these Carbonlite technique specific reels and their rod, especially this one, the 7'4" Dragon rod. Using that for pitching any kind of soft plastic around. It's a great jig rod. I mean, by far the best jig rod I've thrown in a long time. I can't remember having one that's lighter, stronger, and just, it's just a great size. The handle isn't super long, and it's got a lot of power and a lot of tip to be able to throw that underneath the dock. So been super impressed with that. Anytime I'm throwing anything on the bottom here at Lake of the Ozarks, I'm trying to use heavy line, whether it's a shaky head, whether it's a jig, a brush hog, some kind of soft plastic, Carolina rig, you name it. I want a bigger rod, so heavy action rod, usually that 7'4" Dragon rod, and fast gear ratio reel, 8 to 1 at least. I think this is an 8.2 to 1 gear ratio here, 8.3 to 1 actually. And I got 20-pound Bass Pro Shops XPS fluorocarbon on there. I want to use as big a line as I can get away with. And the big line makes it a lot easier. I like to skip underneath these boat docks a lot this time of year, especially when it's sunny out, there's a lot of shade. And that bigger line is a lot more manageable. It helps get your bait underneath that dock and it doesn't coil on you as bad. You're not gonna have to deal with as many backlashes. And we have a lot of heavy cover in the lake, whether it's metal on the boat docks, cables, brush piles, zebra mussels attached to everything. So you want some abrasion resistant line and a bigger line size, like at least 14 pound and above, for sure. And that's even on my top waters. On my top water baits, I'm throwing monofilament, XPS mono on a lot of those, or braid. And I'm using like a 20-pound mono or a 50-pound braid. And the bigger braid helps with treble hook lures too. You're not going to get that that treble hook caught in the fine fibers of that braid rather. So heavy line, big rods, Texas rigs, shaky heads, top waters. I love this Mag Finake, like a bigger shaky head is kind of what I'm talking about. Even the 10-inch worm, it's one of my staples. But this is a Mag Finake worm from Bass Pro. Big fat profile. It's got a little cupped tail on there, which I like. Gives a little bit of action to it. But these bigger profile baits, something big. They're feeding on those small shad, like I said. But as we get into fall, the fish are getting bigger. The shad that have spawned are getting bigger, those little shad fry, and a lot of gizzard shad pulling up shallow. So I like a big bait. Just in general, I like a big bait to catch fish and to keep my interest. I just kind of like throwing that stuff. So glide baits, big swim baits, any kind of square bill crankbait, shallow on these flats. My Trophy Bass Company spinner bait's gonna start working, whether you're reeling it down the side of a dock, windy banks, through the middle of some of those shad, it's all gonna work. So it's about keeping on the move. It's about finding the bait and fishing baits that you're comfortable with. So shallow water, pull out your jigs, your Texas rigs, and then, have some moving baits. Have a top water, have a crankbait or a spinner bait on, something to cover, a series of depth ranges. You want from shallow to deep covered this time of year, because the fish are doing it all. And, you can do that throughout the course of a day, stop and try some shallow docks, try some shallow wood, check out some of these flats, pop out to a point, fish a brush pile. You can do all of that in the same day. And sometimes that's what it takes to do well and win tournaments here. You got to stay on your toes, experiment a little bit. There's usually a pattern of the day, but that pattern doesn't always last a long time. So the fall is a great time to go out and learn new techniques. I do have some guide trips available. Going to be a busy fall tournament wise for me, but it's one of my favorite times to get out on the water. Probably my favorite time to tournament bass fish. There's a lot going on, and you really got to stay on your toes and change up and move around to stay on these fish. So fun time of year, lots of tournaments coming up. Things are changing here at the lake, and the fish are biting. So we've been catching a lot of them, shallow to deep, and they're just going to continue to start biting, keep biting, I should say, and it should just only improve. So good luck to you guys coming down here for tournaments. Should be a great fall. I'm really excited and looking forward to some of the events I've got going on. If you want a guide trip, send me a text, send me a message, let me know. Get a hold of me on my Facebook or Instagram channels, and we'll try to get out there on the water. Fishing should be good. So crappie are going to start biting here soon, and those white bass are going to be feeding super heavy here in the next month or so. So great time to be on the water, and we'll see you out there.